Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. I'm briefly going to discuss reentry permits, specifically in the context of Thai immigration and U.S. immigration. So the first half of this video is briefly going to discuss Thai reentry permits, and the second half of this video will discuss reentry permits in, well, maybe not the second half, but the second portion of this video will discuss reentry permits in the context of United States immigration. For Thailand, reentry permits generally are necessary for non-immigrant visas, and in the specific context, they're generally issued in connection with a visa extension. So someone who comes into Thailand, oftentimes initially on a 90-day visa, and usually these types of visas that deal with reentry permits, in my experience, the ones that we should be looking at here in this context are going to be business visas, O visas based on marriage, and retirement visas. So initially, a person is going to come into Thailand. They're going to be on a 90-day visa. If it's a business visa, they're going to go ahead and get a work permit, and then they're going to go ahead and they tend to either extend that visa or go ahead and get a multiple entry 1-year visa. I'll discuss briefly multiple entry visas at the end of this. For now, we're strictly talking about visa extensions. So this individual, say they're in Bangkok, they've gone down to Chiang Wat Immigration Office, they've gotten their extension, so they've gone ahead and gotten a 1-year extension on their initial 90-day visa. And once that extension is issued, that individual can basically stay in Thailand for an entire year. And that person is going to be in status. Here's the situation where reentry permits and why reentry permits are necessary. If an individual leaves Thailand and they have an extension and they leave Thailand without getting a reentry permit, then that individual will need, their visa status will die, essentially, upon their exit from the kingdom. So, if you come in, you get your work permit, you get your 1-year extension, and let's say you leave, you don't get a reentry permit. If you try to come back in, they're basically going to stamp you in with a 30-day stamp, and they're going to say, nope, you don't have, say, business visa status anymore. The same can be said for an O visa based on having a spouse who's a Thai national or parentage of a Thai national child. An O visa holder can get an extension. Say, again, if you're in Bangkok, you go out to Chiang Wat, they can go ahead and get an extension. If they leave, that extension dies, unless they get a reentry permit. It should be noted that there are 2 types of reentry permits. One can get a multiple entry reentry permit or a single entry reentry permit. That's up to the individual, depending on how many times a year that person is going to be leaving the country. I tend to go ahead and just get a multiple entry reentry permit just in case, because I don't really want to have to deal with it after I get my extension. Other people opt for just the single entry, and sometimes they may purchase another one later or not. They may not even need it. It should be noted that reentry permits can be obtained through either Chiang Wat at the main immigration office out there, or there are kiosks, offices of Thai immigration at both Suvarnabhumi Airport and Don Mueang Airport where a reentry permit can be obtained. It's strongly recommended that those interested in getting a reentry permit on their way out of the country at the airport check in advance that office is going to be open and arrive with quite a bit of time to go ahead and process that reentry permit prior to leaving because, backlogs can arise out of nowhere. It's just a good idea to show up early if you're going to be obtaining your entry permit prior to your exit from the airport. Retirement visas, retirees need to get a reentry permit too if they get a retirement visa extension. So if you get your 1-year extension, you're going to go ahead and need to get your reentry permit prior to leaving, or again, your visa basically cancels at the point at which you depart the country. This can be quite an annoyance for folks because I have had clients in the past and people that are friends and things just sort of tell me, yeah, I totally forgot to get it, I left. It's been my experience that immigration, the officers stamping you out, they have such a backlog, they don't particularly have time to go through your immigration status and ascertain whether or not you have a reentry permit prior to you leaving. I have heard stories of officers who say, hey, whoa, You might want to go, do you want to come back? And they say yes, and they say, well, you need to go get a reentry permit before letting me stamp you out. And they in fact go and do that. But in some cases, and it's not based on any malice on the part of the immigration officer, they're processing dozens, maybe even hundreds of folks in a given hour, you know, and they just simply don't have the time to flip through somebody's passport and ascertain whether or not they've got a reentry permit. So it's sort of one's sort of left on their own for those things, and getting a reentry permit, it's usually advisable to just go ahead and get it at the time the visa extension occurs. But if that's not possible or not particularly desirable, then a reentry permit can be obtained at the airport prior to departure, and when obtaining that reentry permit, one can leave and then come back into the country and their visa status remains intact. This is the point at which we're going to go from Thai visa reentry permit issue. Well, very quickly, before I move over to U.S. immigration, very quickly let me discuss multiple entry one-year visas. There's a difference between having a one-year visa extension and having a multiple entry visa, one-year visa. If you get a one-year multi-entry visa issued abroad, that's at a Thai embassy or consulate outside of Thailand, then one can come in and use that visa for all of a year. And let's say it's a business visa, for example. O visas operate the same way effectively. If you get a B or an O visa, which is a one-year multi-entry visa, you come into Thailand and you're granted 90 days lawful status. So you have to leave within 90 days of arriving in Thailand. You can do a border run, you can run out of the airport, leave by sea, whatever, and turn around and come right back in, and you get another 90 days. And it just happens like that for the course of the visa, throughout the one-year period in which the visa is valid. Reentry permits are not necessary for these kind of visas. In a way, the system is inverted. So the multi-entry visa, you have to leave every 90 days. And there's another video on this channel that talks about 90-day reporting with respect to visa extensions. So if you don't leave every 90 days on a visa extension, then you have to check in with immigration and stipulate where you're still staying, etc. With a multi-entry, you have to leave every 90 days, but you don't need a reentry permit. If you have an extension and you don't get a reentry permit and you leave the country, your visa dies. So you have to get a reentry permit in order to leave. In a way, it's sort of inverted. On an extension, you stay, and if you continue to stay, it doesn't matter. You don't need a reentry permit. But on a multi-entry visa, you have to leave. It's built into the visa itself. So something to think about. But reentry permits, I strongly recommend those who are getting visa extensions here in the country, be it retirement, be it O visa, be it B visa, to keep in mind reentry permits are necessary to maintain one's status if one wishes to leave the country and return and maintain that status. So from this point in the video, we're going to leave Thai reentry permits alone, and we're going to talk very briefly about U.S. reentry permits. The U.S. immigration system is somewhat different than the Thai system. In fact, it's quite different than the Thai system with respect to reentry permits. A reentry permit generally comes up in the context of, in the cases I primarily deal with, which are family immigration cases, people that are in the United States as spouses or children of an American citizen or lawful permanent resident. So those people are going to have essentially green card status. There's an issue that comes up in U.S. immigration matters where the presumption that one has abandoned their residence in the United States can arise if one leaves the United States for a period of time. Usually the presumption starts to arise if one's been abroad for longer than about a year, or if one's green card is expired. A reentry permit, it looks much like a passport. It's a little book that's issued for those who are in green card status, lawful permanent residents in the United States. It's for those who wish to, they think in the foreseeable future they're going to be abroad for an extended period of time. So they go ahead and get a reentry permit prior to leaving the United States in order to ensure that they can return within a 2-year period and maintain their lawful status. So basically what we're talking about here is somebody who's a green card holder. Let's say they're married to a person who is an American citizen. Let's say that American citizen works for a company that's transferring them overseas. That individual may not know exactly when he or she is going to be returning to the United States. So it's probably a good idea to get that spouse a reentry permit, because that spouse is a green card holder, may or may not yet be naturalized to United States citizenship, and, well, presumably in this case would not be naturalized to United States citizenship, would still remain a green card holder. It might not be a bad idea to get a reentry permit prior to leaving the country, prior to leaving the U.S., because then once the reentry permit is issued, that individual can be away from the U.S. for that full 2-year period. As long as they come back prior to the validity of the reentry permit expiring, they'll come back and their lawful permanent residence will be maintained. In a way, it's somewhat similar to the Thai system, but in a way, it's not particularly similar to the Thai system.